Hello, everyone. Welcome to InApp podcast. I am here with my co-host Kiran, and today we'll be talking about Agile project management. Now, project management can be a very dry topic to some. It's mostly process, so may not be that exciting to many. But it is one of the crucial elements of implementing a successful software development project. So we'll try and make it as interesting as possible. Now, to talk on the topic, we have with us the Chief Operating Officer at InApp, Mr. Jayakrishnan. He's a 20 plus year veteran of the IT industry and is responsible for overseeing the operations at InApp Development Center. This includes managing software development and project delivery. Now, he has been a volunteer of IEEE for long and is currently the chair, Special Interest Group on Humanitarian Technology at IEEE Kerala section. So, Mr. Jain, welcome to the podcast. We are quite excited to have you join us.
Thank you, Sunuja, to give me an opportunity. And I don't know how much of project management that I know, but still.
All right. So just a quick note before we start on how this session is going to be. This will be a quick Q&A format, and we have a couple of pre-source questions. Now, I'll start off with the first question, and then Kiran will follow up. Then we'll wrap up with a few of questions that I have. So my first question is, as IT professionals, we have heard the term, agile project development, agile project management. But for those who do not know what it is, can you explain what agile is and how is it different from traditional approaches like waterfall?
Yes, Sunuja, that's maybe a good start, I can say. So if I go back a bit of history on project management, the modern project management actually goes back to the early 20th century when a person called Henry Gantt developed a chart that is for representing the project schedule. And a project, as you know, has a definite start and an end. So it has a schedule, it has a timeline. So Henry Gantt developed a chart which is known by his name, Gantt chart, and still being used by many people for representing the project schedules. So that was the beginning of modern project management. And during the second half of 20th century, we have seen a lot of advancement in project management. There are a lot of new methodologies, new forms of representing projects all came up. Some of the methods like project evaluation and review technique, which is PERT, and critical path method, which is CPM, known as CPM, have evolved over time. And there were other methods like earned value management, etc. Then in the same period, the several project managers who are managing projects decided and formed a kind of an association which is called the Project Management Institute, PMI. And they started to release document on project management, which is basically the collection of best practices or organized collection of best practices, which is called Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK. So that was the state of project management till maybe towards the end of 20th century, you can say. However, towards the end of that period, that is the 20th century, and definitely in the beginning of 21st century, we saw a steep rise in the number of software projects, which are very much different from the traditional manufacturing or construction or any other engineering projects. And during this boom, in the Silicon Valley, there were a lot of small startups developing ideas into products, and they most of these startups were running against time, and they were very agile, dynamic people as well as projects. So slowly we have started to see the traditional methods of PERT, CPM, or EVM, or any other work breakdown structures, or using Gantt chart, etc., were not fitting very well with software projects, because software
Okay.
by nature is very soft, and the soft materials are easy to change. So you can see the amount or the volume of changes happening in software projects are way too high than any other conventional projects. So the software managers or software project managers introduced or they were started looking out for new methodologies, and finally consolidated everything and published a manual called Agile Manifesto, which is basically a different way of managing projects, which are more suitable for software projects. So this Agile Manifesto laid down the basic principles of Agile project management. And most of the software development and services organizations started to practice or follow the Agile methodologies. And you have asked me about the basic difference. So the
Right.
basic difference of Agile methodologies from the traditional project management methodologies is that these are more dynamic compared to the static and linear nature of traditional methods. And dynamic in the sense they're more adaptable to changes, where the traditional methods are more monolithic and change averse kind of methods. So, and another major difference is that agile methodologies encourage teams to do smaller and shorter cycles and iterate more while progressing with the development, where the traditional methods use very long cycles and less iterations in projects. So those are the major differences, and the benefit of shorter cycles is that it can identify the issues or required changes earlier in the project life cycle than later, and it is always easier to accommodate changes if you find or identify them earlier in the project life cycle. So that
Right.
is what agile methodologies is. That is when the need of agile methodologies came up, and that is how it developed.
Okay. No, that was quite a history on project management and how it has evolved into agile approach. Now I think I'll hand it over to Kiran. Kiran for the next question.
Thank you, Sunuja. Hi, Jane. My first question is a very basic question on project management. So, can you talk about the kind of projects that are well suited to agile project management?
What are the projects that are well suited? Any project is my one word answer,
Okay.
which means most of the new age software projects where the technologies are used are challenging and changing at a very fast pace, which also causes or uh, need to change or bring in change both in the technology as well as in requirements or features, where the agile methodologies will definitely are better. So if you consider the projects or products being developed by the startups, where an idea, they will have an idea which is 80% mature, and they'll start the project or start the development, and the rest of the 20% or 20-30% will get refined as they progress. So inevitably there are changes going to come in the project, and that is where agile methodologies of shorter iterations, as I said early, will definitely be of great help. Having said that, the same methodology, the agile methodologies, can very well go with the traditional large maintenance projects or rewriting of very large software applications, etc.
Okay. So you could say that Agile is more focused about adapting to changes that can come in a project. And so if Agile is more focused on accommodating changes in the project, do we pay a price in terms of the time and cost it takes for the project?
Yes, in fact, it is far easier to manage time and cost if you use Agile than other conventional method. This is again because that the developer as well as the client or the end user of the software product will start seeing the product at very short intervals. And it is always easier to accommodate changes if we identify them earlier in the process than later. So in the conventional method, what happens is the user and client, they just gave out their requirement, the developer go back, they take their sweet time to come out with an output, and they will come up with a completed product in front of the user, and they will see that, oh, this is something which is not what I want, or these are the changes that I want to make, or this could have been better in this way. And finally, to make changes, the developer will have to completely go back and start from beginning in many cases. But here what happens is the user is seeing the output at a very short intervals. Maybe in 2 weeks time they'll start seeing the things, and it is very easy to change whatever that we have done in this 2 weeks time, or even 3 or 4 weeks time, instead of a 6 months time. So that is how we manage both time as well as manage cost in agile methodology, and I feel that is far easier and better in agile than traditional methods.
Yeah, that's correct. Like Agile offers that flexibility to review the product in the regular intervals and resolve the issues in the initial
Yeah.
project development itself. Now, my next question is regarding the progress and success of a project. So, how do you track project progress and measure project success in an Agile approach?
So in all the agile methodologies, we have very clear suggested methods to measure the progress. So for that, let me introduce some of the terminologies like story points, velocity, then burn down charts, etc. These are some of the tools or methods or adopted in Agile to measure the progress. So what are they? So a project usually split into smaller elements, which are called user stories. And what is the difference? Even in the very early times of project management or software development, we had function points because software is divided into function. Then when Agile came in, uh, there's a small change because each of the user features are written as a story, which is called the user story. And similar to function points, each of these stories we assign a story point, which defines the size of the story. And now every project will have a set of stories in the something called a backlog. Backlog contains the entire set of user stories, and each story will have a story point. Now the developers, what they do for each iteration, which sometimes called a sprint, which will be of, let us say, ideal length is something like 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And they know the team who are working, and they take a few stories for a sprint. They define these are the stories that we are going to do in a sprint. And how are they defining? They know the capabilities of the people who are working, and they know what are the features to be developed. And each feature has a size. So the number of story points the team can handle in a defined sprint, which is also called the velocity of the team. And depending on the velocity, they take the stories from the backlog and fill up and plan their sprint. Okay, and once you identify the velocity, then you know how many stories can be taken, and they prepare their sprint plan based on the velocity and story points and the stories. And now, as they progress, a chart is plotted, which is called a burn down chart, which represents or which will give you how the project is progressing or how the sprint is progressing. So these are the different tools that are used in agile methodologies to measure the progress. And the best tool is the product itself. So after every sprint, there is something called a sprint demo by definition. That is to show whatever the team has completed to the end user or the client or whoever is who all are the stakeholders of the project. So this sprint demo will clearly show the product and the progress of the work. So that is also very important to have this sprint demo at the end of each sprint. So these are the different ways that you can measure the progress.
Okay. And what about the extent of client involvement in the success of an agile project? And what do you think? How much involved should they be?
Yeah, I think client involvement is very critical, and irrespective of the process, that's what I say. But in the earlier processes or conventional project management processes, what happens is the client is only responsible to define what are the requirements, and after that it is the entire project is on the developers, and finally the client is only will get the final uh, product or the output, and then they will get an opportunity to comment. And by that time, all the errors or all the deviations from the features all must have happened. So in Agile, definitely the Agile methodologies define a lot more importance to the involvement of the client. And the clients are usually or definitely should involve while the team is planning their sprint, because the client knows the priority and they can help the team to take which are the stories that they should take into a sprint. And the second thing is client should be available for sprint demos. That is at the end of the sprint, when the team is showing whatever that they have developed in a sprint, the client has a role to see and comment and do the review and give the feedback. Then there is something called sprint retrospective, which is after the demo, the team and the client sit together and see what all went good in the sprint, what all were not up to the mark or requires improvement and need to change in the next sprint. All these are decided along with the client. So the client is very closely associated in an agile process during the execution of a project.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's very important to have a good client team interaction for success of a project. And my next question is regarding the challenges in project management. Since you have a long experience of managing software projects at InApp, what are the key challenges in project management in the software industry today, and how are you tackling them?
Okay, this is whether it is Agile or any waterfall or any other methodology that we use. Uh, and the challenges may vary from people to people, but to me, or my perspective on challenges, if you ask, are three. One, definitely this must be a very common challenge that everybody must be facing, which is managing people. Because especially in software projects, uh, we don't have a lot of missionaries to manage other than a few computers, but it is all depends on the people. So managing people is a challenge. Then managing technology is another major challenge, because technology keeps on changing. And if you have a project running for 6 months, the technology that used when you start the project may get obsolete by the time you finish the project. So you will have to selection of technology onwards. It is a big challenge. Then another, definitely the nature of the software is change, and to manage the change successfully is another major challenge. So these are the three major challenges: managing people, technology, and change. And if you take the first one, managing people, you can see each individual is different, and the attitude of people, the skill sets, their likes and dislikes of whether the technology or methods or the time of working, everything are different. And each of these are important. And we will have to satisfy the individual's liking while we allocate work, or not just liking their skills, their capabilities. All these will have to be considered. Otherwise, it will adversely affect the productivity. So if you manage your work based on the people, the productivity will be very good. So the project manager will have to maintain a fine balance to satisfy all these factors while allocating work to get the maximum output from the entire team. So team is another set of people. So all these are applicable to each and every member in the team. So from my experience, the best way to address this is by bringing in maximum transparency and visibility to whatever we do, and try and make it a very participatory process so that everybody needs to agree and know about the decisions. That's how you can manage people. And the second, on the technology, what I would say, the technology challenge starts with can say selection of technology for a project. And there, personally, I would like to use the term appropriate technology for a project than the latest or the greatest technology. What is the difference here? The appropriate technology depends on various factors like client's preferences, people and skill availability, then terms of licenses, etc. So the latest or greatest technology may not be considering the client preferences, because client will have their own platforms readily available, and they would like to do, or they may have one person to help them out technically, and he will have his own capabilities and skills in particular technology. So those are client preferences. Then our own people and availability of skills within the organization. Then some people may have problem with software licenses. or they may prefer to go with software with some licenses. So all these will have to be considered, and this will come or may not come in the latest technology, but that is why may or may not. So it can be latest, but I would like to call it as appropriate technology by considering all this. Then architecture and design also should match with the requirements of the client. So projects should not be used for learning a new technology, rather a learned technology should be used for a project. That is, I consider as a criteria for project success. Then how do you manage change? So changes depend majorly on the requirements. And if the client clearly knows what they want, then the changes will be less. But that situations will be very less. Then there is another gap. Whatever that client tells, the project team should understand or get whatever that is meant by the client. There can be a difference or gap in the team's understanding. So clients may know the big picture, but might not have thought about the finer details. And there can be some technology challenges on top of that. So there are a lot of reasons why changes are inevitable to an extent in most of the projects. And how these can be managed is always a challenge. And that is why we use many of these agile methodologies and shorter cycles and client demos, frequent demos to the client. All these will help to manage changes. So these are the three major challenges that are according to me.
Yeah, so it's about managing people, technology changes, and project change requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I have one more question before I hand it over again to Sunuja. Can you take us through some of the challenges you have had to face when it comes to the agile project management, and how did you manage it?
That is like that's you're asking about my job. That's what I do. Okay. So there are several projects giving challenges to project managers and project teams, and uh, or rather all projects give challenges to the people who are doing the project. But if you ask me for some uh, specific examples, maybe I can quote a recent one where we have provided a team of developers. Okay, team of not just team of developers and a project manager for a particular client for doing a project, and this particular client was also kind of a partner, or rather, InApp was a technology partner to this client, and they were developing a product, software product.
Okay.
And the requirements were developed, or the features which should go into this product were developed by the product manager from the client side, and he has a very good knowledge in the domain, and he knows what should go into, and he developed and he was instructing or passing on that to the team, and team is very happy because the product manager knows what needs to go into the product or what they should develop and what are the priorities, and the project started, and the product slowly started to take some shape. And parallelly, the company started to find new clients for the product, and they were signed some, they got some clients, and the clients started signing up, and they started to show this product to the clients, and some of them bought this and started to use. And when they started to use, they found that, oh, this particular feature is missing, or this should have been done in this way or in a different way. So the product manager started to pass that back to the team. So the one client will seek some changes, the other client will see some other changes. So slowly, as the client number of clients started increasing, the product features also started actually branching out, and many different versions of the same product started to come in, and the team was finding it very difficult to manage all these changes, all these versions. They don't know which version goes to which client, which changes to be accommodated in which version, etc. And these confusions are growing, and this made the team becoming very frustrated, unmotivated, and slowly everybody, that is all stakeholders, becoming unhappy in the project. So this is a real situation where we brought in it, though it was started or following a kind of agile methodology, or they were trying to follow agile methodology, but they were not very strictly following many of the best practices suggested by the agile. So we brought in a lot more strictness into the process, and had a lot more frequent communications and shorter cycles, which definitely helped to improve the output and the project. And what we did was we kind of divided the features into a lot more smaller um, tasks, and um, got very clear understanding of these smaller tasks from the product manager, and decided to go with smaller iterations, or that is, earlier we were going with something like 4 to 6 weeks for each iteration, which was brought down to 2 weeks, and started to show to the product manager in every 2 weeks, which helped us to bring in a lot more easiness in bringing all the parts together and to manage the project better. So this is definitely one of the experience that we have gone through recently, and the agile methodologies in its real sense, when we started applying, helped us a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Kiran. Jay, now let's move the discussion to the current situation that we are in now. So, with the pandemic going on, we are all working in isolation, and you are actually having to manage a very distributed team. So, has the approach to agile project management actually changed in your opinion? And if so, what changes have you had to make to maintain the progress of your projects?
Uh, Fundamentally, there is no change, because project is a project, and the timeline is a timeline, the team is a team, and features are there in projects, and we need to develop. So there is no real change happened in the approach, and need to happen also. So
Okay.
fundamentals, everything will remain the same. However, as we are all now distributed and confined to our homes, and not meeting others, it will always be good to increase the frequency of progress reviews, even within the team, not with the client, but within the team. Otherwise, there are a lot of casual meetings happen, and you will come to know of the progress, which may not happen in this distributed uh, away from office kind of situation. So it is always better to increase the frequency of project reviews, and the usual morning stand-ups. We can have a lot more detailed reviews once or twice a week. That is in between sprints, do these reviews, and this will help to identify any kind of issues which are happening in the projects again earlier than even in a sprint's length. So that will help to fix the problems.
Okay. So
Then,
basically, you've had to. Oh yeah, please go.
yeah, it is definitely yes, the frequency, and also we should see how infrastructure is helping, because definitely now the network speed, the computer speed, and all that are critical for the project success or even project communication. So those are also we need to look at and uh, make it available to the people, so that those won't become a bottleneck in the project.
So, I mean, you're talking about communication. So, I mean, how do you find it? I mean, do you find it's equally effective when you compare with the face-to-face meetings that you had pre-COVID?
I think my experience is virtual meeting so far is good and
Okay,
also effective, or I should say more effective.
right. Okay.
However, we should also see, because yeah, for anything we are there on the screen, we can see people, and also we will be very productive in meeting, because there are lot many meetings are organized. So everybody is very busy. They will finish whatever they want to do in a meeting, and so the meetings are a lot more productive. However, there is a problem, because the long hours in front of these screens and video calls, I don't know, it might generate some fatigue to people, and we should encourage everybody to take frequent breaks from their work desk to reduce the stress and strain. That may vary from people to people, but I think this is a general uh, thing that people may get fatigue. So one another drawback sometimes happens when the people with whom we are talking did not switch on the video. So we lose the
Mm,
personal touch when we don't see the other person while talking, uh, because it is not just words that communicates. Your face, your expressions, your movements, everything is communicating, which we are missing. If so, definitely the video calls can, to an extent, fill that gap. But here, the infrastructure has a big role. So we should
right.
see that definitely it is filling the gap, but there are certain other issues that
Hmm.
also we need to see and address.
Yeah, the lack of social interaction is actually a major concern now.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. The personal touch in meetings.
yes, right, very true. Okay, so now we have one final question before we wrap up. It's about developments that is happening in the agile approach. Now we know that these approaches actually evolve with time and as people use it. So, what are some of the latest trends that you're noticing in Apple in agile project management, and what is more important now than it was some time back?
Okay, so as I said in the beginning, Agile got introduced almost 15 or yeah, 15 to almost 20 years back, you can say. And many people, especially the software project people, started to adopt the Agile methodologies. But there were these large project teams. Let us say there are projects with 50 or 100 people projects. They were still reluctant to switch to agile practices, because their timeline will be very long. So there is no meaning for a 2 weeks or 4 weeks sprint, because there won't be anything ready. There won't be anything to demo. So many of these things will have to be bypassed. So they were not following that. However, the people who were the promoters or pushing for Agile, they found out something called scaled Agile frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically one of the method which is called a Scrum at scale. These are to help these large projects. So that is where the Agile methodologies are slowly moving to, so that
Okay.
all projects, whether it is small or large, can start adopting Agile methodologies, which is basically the scale to Scrum or scaled Agile frameworks are breaking up of project into smaller projects, and for each project spawn off one as a complete project and adopt an agile methodology. Then there can be a integration project, which is again can be a agile method. So there are clear best practices or written frameworks, which is one area where the agile methods are slowly moving towards. And also
Mm-hmm.
we can see that even non-IT projects have started
Mm-hmm.
to adopt agile methodologies. So there
Okay.
also they are customizing agile methodologies to suit their projects. And the major difference that I see between these two are the agile methodologies are outcome driven, means the output is a measure there, and the other conventional methods are more practice driven. So that is a cultural shift from practice driven to outcome driven process.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Jen, for your time today. I know we have just touched the tip of the iceberg in this, and that there is many more to be discussed on this topic. So we hope that you will join us again sometime to go a little bit more in depth into the topic. And so thank you again. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Tanuja and Kiran. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, anytime, please let me know. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.